In the grand, violent theater of World War II, some stories are so immense they define the conflict itself. D-Day, Stalingrad, Midway. But history is also written in the margins, in the strange footnotes and bizarre coincidences that feel too perfect to be true. This is one of those stories. It's the story of a forgotten ship, a rookie captain, and a warning that went unheard. It's the story of the first American shot fired in the Pacific War, and of a fate so poetic, so impossibly symmetrical, that it sounds like fiction. This is the story of the United States ship Ward. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a blueprint. In the final years of the First World War, the U.S. Navy embarked on an unprecedented shipbuilding program to counter the German U-boat menace. The result was the Wickes-class destroyer, a fleet of what were known as four-pipers or flush-deckers. They were the Model T Fords of the sea, mass-produced with a focus on speed and quantity over comfort or heavy armor. 111 of them were built in a flurry of industrial activity. The USS Ward, designated Destroyer Number 139, was a record-setter from the start. Laid down at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California on May 15, 1918, her hull was launched a mere 17.5 days later on June 1st, a breathtaking feat of construction. She was officially commissioned into the fleet on July 24, 1918. But the Ward was a weapon built for a war that was already ending. By the time she was ready for service, the armistice was just months away. She completed a few patrols, served a brief stint in the Pacific, and by 1921, with the world seemingly at peace, the Navy had a massive surplus of ships. The Ward, like so many of her sisters, was decommissioned and placed into the reserve fleet, a ghost ship tethered to a pier in San Diego. For 20 years she slept, her decks silent, her guns covered, and her engines cold. To most observers, her story was already over, a footnote in a shipbuilding record. But history had other plans. By early 1941, the world was once again trembling on the brink of war. The United States, while officially neutral, was preparing for the inevitable. The Navy began to wake its sleeping giants, pulling old ships like the Ward from mothballs. She was recommissioned on January 15, 1941, and after a refit, she was assigned not to the front lines, but to the 14th Naval District in a place that was then considered a safe rear area paradise, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The Ward's new role was humble. She was assigned to the Naval Reserve, essentially serving as a training vessel. Her crew was a mix of career sailors and fresh-faced reservists from Minnesota, many of whom had never seen an ocean before. Her job was to patrol the defensive sea area, a designated zone that guarded the narrow channel leading into the heart of the American Pacific Fleet. It was routine, monotonous work. Circling the entrance, day in and day out, watching for anything out of the ordinary. On December 5, 1941, just 2 days before history would be made, the Ward received a new commanding officer. His name was Lieutenant William Woodford Outerbridge. He was just 35 years old, and this was his very first command. He had never commanded a ship at sea, let alone a destroyer in a potential combat zone. He was, by all accounts, a green captain on a second-rate ship, crewed by reservists, guarding the gate to America's fortress in the Pacific. No one on that Friday afternoon could have possibly imagined that the fate of the nation might soon rest in his inexperienced hands. The morning of Sunday, December 7, 1941, began like any other for the crew of the Ward. They had started their patrol at 3:58, steaming back and forth across the harbor entrance in the pre-dawn darkness. The sea was calm, the air was warm. At approximately 6:30, a lookout on the Ward noticed that the nearby General Stores issue ship, USS Antares, was flashing a signal. The Antares, towing a practice target, had spotted something strange in the water nearby. It looked like a small submarine's conning tower, trailing the Antares and her target, seemingly trying to follow them into the harbor through the anti-submarine nets. The Ward's watch officer, Lieutenant Oscar Gepner, called his new captain. William Outerbridge arrived on the bridge, still pulling on his uniform. He stared through his binoculars into the dim morning light. There it was, a small black shape, low in the water, where no American submarine should be. The The area was a restricted zone. Any unidentified submersible was to be treated as hostile. Outerbridge was faced with a monumental decision. He was a brand new captain. Was this a drill? A mistake? If he opened fire and was wrong, his career would be over before it even began. If he hesitated, and it was a real threat, the consequences were unthinkable. In that moment, with the fate of the fleet behind him, the rookie captain did not hesitate. He gave the order that would echo through history: commence firing. At 6:45, the number 1 forward gun of the USS Ward, a 4-inch cannon, barked, spitting a shell across the water. The shot was high, soaring over the mysterious submarine and splashing harmlessly into the ocean beyond. It was a miss. But the men on gun number 3, on the starboard side of the ship, had a better angle. As the Ward turned, they drew a bead on the black shape. A second later, their cannon fired. This time the shell struck true. It punched into the base of the submarine's conning tower, right at the waterline. The small vessel heeled over, mortally wounded. To make absolutely certain, Outerbridge ordered a run, and the Ward's crew rolled 4 depth charges off the stern. The charges exploded in thunderous blasts, churning the water and sealing the intruder's fate. The Japanese Type A Koyoteki-class midget submarine sank to the bottom of the sea. At 6:53, just 8 minutes after opening fire, Lieutenant Outerbridge sent a coded message to the commandant of the 14th Naval District. The message was clear and direct. We have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges upon submarine operating in defensive sea area. The first shot of the Pacific War had been fired by an American warship. A clear warning of an imminent attack had been sent. Tragically, the warning was lost in the fog of bureaucracy and disbelief. The message had to be relayed, decoded, and passed up a chain of command that was still sleepy on a Sunday morning. When it finally reached the top brass, it was met with skepticism. A nervous new captain on an old destroyer? A submarine? It was probably nothing. They decided to wait for verification. That verification would arrive at 7:55, not in the form of a report, but in the form of hundreds of Japanese bombs and torpedoes raining down on Battleship Row. The USS Ward had done its duty perfectly. But it wasn't enough. In the aftermath of the Pearl Harbor attack, the Ward's action was confirmed. The crew were recognized as heroes who had drawn first blood, but the ship itself was now an aging relic in a new kind of war. The era of the slow, gun-focused destroyer was over. The Navy needed fast carrier escorts and versatile amphibious ships. So, in 1943, the Ward sailed back to California to undergo a radical transformation. Her old identity as DD-139 was stripped away. 2 of her 4 iconic smokestacks were removed, as were some of her boilers and all of her torpedo tubes. Her main guns were replaced with smaller 3-inch dual-purpose cannons. In their place, the ship was fitted to carry 4 landing craft and accommodations for up to 150 combat troops. On February 6, 1943, she was reborn with a new name and purpose: USS Ward, High-Speed Transport APD-16. Her new job was arguably even more dangerous than her old one. As a high-speed transport, the Ward became a vital link in the island-hopping campaign across the Pacific. Her mission was to ferry elite troops, Marines, Army Rangers, and Navy Seabees on high-speed runs to hostile shores. She wasn't meant to fight fleet actions. She was a combat taxi, designed to get in, drop off her deadly passengers, and get out, often under heavy fire. For the next 2 years, the Ward served with distinction in the brutal grind of the Pacific War. Her journey was a litany of famous and ferocious campaigns. She served in the Solomon Islands, supporting the bloody struggle for Guadalcanal. She transported troops during the landings at Cape Gloucester, on the island of New Britain. She was part of the force that secured Emerald Island, helping to isolate the massive Japanese base at Rabaul. She participated in the vast landings at Hollandia and Aitupe in New Guinea, facing enemy air raids and treacherous coastlines. She ferried troops to the shores of Biak, a battle so fierce it became a month-long ordeal. Throughout it all, the Ward and her crew performed their duties tirelessly, a small but essential cog in the mighty American war machine, steaming thousands upon thousands of miles across the vast contested ocean. By late 1944, the war had reached the Philippines. The Ward, now a seasoned veteran of amphibious warfare, was assigned to the massive 7th Fleet for the invasion of Leyte. In early December, she was tasked with a particularly dangerous mission. She was part of a convoy carrying troops and supplies to Ormoc Bay on the western coast of Leyte. This was a critical Japanese stronghold, and the enemy was determined to defend it at all costs. The skies over the Philippines were now filled with a new and terrifying threat: the kamikaze. Young Japanese pilots flying planes packed with explosives on a one-way mission to die for their emperor by crashing into American ships. On the morning of December 7, 1944, exactly 3 years to the day after she fired the first American shot of the war, the USS Ward was on station in Ormoc Bay. She was performing her duty as a screening vessel, her guns pointed to the sky, protecting the vulnerable landing ships as they unloaded men and material onto the beach. The air was thick with tension. Suddenly, the sky erupted. A wave of Japanese aircraft descended on the American fleet. The Ward's gunners, along with those on the surrounding ships, threw up a wall of anti-aircraft fire. But one plane broke through. It was a Japanese Ki-43 fighter, what the Allies called an Oscar. It wasn't a dedicated dive bomber, but it was flying with a suicidal purpose. It streaked through the flak, low over the water, aiming directly for the old four-piper. The Ward's gunners tracked it, firing furiously, but it was too fast. The kamikaze slammed into the Ward's port side, right between her boiler rooms and the troop compartment. The impact was devastating. The plane's bomb and remaining fuel ignited, turning the ship's midsection into a raging inferno. The fire fed on the Ward's own fuel oil, spreading with terrifying speed. The crew battled the blaze with everything they had, but it was a hopeless fight. The water mains lost pressure, rendering their hoses useless. Ammunition began to cook off in the intense heat. The ship was dying, with the fires completely out of control and the vessel doomed. The ship's commander, Lieutenant Richard Farwell, gave the heartbreaking but necessary order: abandon ship. The surviving crew members, many of them burned and wounded, went over the side into the oily water of the bay. The burning hulk of the USS Ward was now a hazard to the rest of the fleet. Drifting and covered in flames, she needed to be sunk. The task force commander gave the order to a nearby destroyer to finish the job. That destroyer was the USS O'Brien, designated DD-725. The O'Brien steamed closer, its crew preparing their guns to deliver the final blow to the stricken American ship. And on the bridge of the O'Brien, watching the tragedy unfold, was her commanding officer. His name was Commander William Woodford Outerbridge. In one of the most staggering coincidences in the annals of naval warfare, the man who had begun his command career by leading the USS Ward into its first battle was now, by a sheer twist of fate, tasked with ending its life. The rookie lieutenant of 1941 was now a seasoned commander. His first command, the ship that had made him a hero, was now a burning wreck before him. He had to give the order to destroy his own ship. At 2100, the guns of the USS O'Brien opened fire on the helpless Ward. Shell after shell slammed into the old destroyer's hull, and soon after, the ship that fired the first American shot of World War II slipped beneath the waves of Ormoc Bay, her final resting place lying over 1,900 miles, 3,100 kilometers, from where her war began. Her story had come full circle, ending on the exact same date it began, at the hands of the very same man who had once been her master. For decades, the story of the USS Ward was a cherished legend within the U.S. Navy, a tale of heroism and incredible irony. For over 70 years, she rested in the deep, dark waters off the coast of Leyte. Then, in late 2017, a research vessel, the RV Petrel, funded by the late Paul Allen, was surveying the floor of Ormoc Bay. Using state-of-the-art sonar and remotely operated vehicles, the team found her. There she was, sitting upright and remarkably intact, over 650 feet, 200 meters below the surface. The footage showed the old four-piper, her guns silent, her decks empty. And there, clear as day on her hull, were the shell holes from the guns of the USS O'Brien, the final, fatal wounds delivered by her first captain. The ghost had been found, confirming the end of one of history's most extraordinary naval sagas. The USS Ward's story is a testament to the strange rhymes of history, a perfect, solemn poem of service, duty, and fate. It's a reminder that even in the chaos of global war, there are moments of impossible symmetry, where a ship's life can begin and end with the same man. on the same day, years and worlds apart. But what other vessels, what other machines of war, have fates just as unbelievable, stories just waiting to be told? We want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what piece of military history you think deserves its own investigation. Your mission briefing could become our next deep dive into the archives. And to ensure you're on board for that next voyage into the past, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and enabled notifications. You won't want to miss what we uncover next.